Welcome back, everybody. Final half hour of an Overreaction Monday. Nothing with fans to overreact with here this week. Bison Jackrabbits on tap, Coyotes, and Bobcats as well. The games all on WDAY. Looking forward to that on a rather large sports Saturday. I believe we have Tennessee, Ohio State on that night as well. So we got a pretty good lineup of games coming up on the opening round of the college football playoff. Our next guest has been a busy man running between Vermilion and Brookings this fall. Jay Elsen joins us from Midcoast Sports, who, of course, calls both South Dakota State and South Dakota football, which I don't know how you navigated that. You had the luck of the calendar this year, right? That worked out tremendously, right?
Yeah, it was could not have. If we were going to try something like that, it could not have possibly worked out a whole lot better. There's only 1 week. D-Day's Hobo Day was the only day where they were both home at the same time when they weren't either playing each other or on the road. Both of them were 2 weeks where they were when the Jacks were in Fargo and USD was at Murray and then it was, given the circumstances, it could have gone a whole lot worse that way, and this made it a lot more manageable.
All right.
We'll see how it goes going forward.
So you saw that South Dakota game with Davis on Saturday was wild. If anybody hangs onto the ball, that maybe is a much different result. Give us the lowdown. You were there on the broadcast team on the radio side. What did you make of how South Dakota played on Saturday?
Yeah, honestly, I thought they played really well. It felt like at one point in the second half, before Davis got their final touchdown of the day, I had leaned over to somebody that I know on the sideline. I said, man, it feels like it should be 42-14 right now. And it really probably should have been. Yeah. 2 turnovers inside the 5-yard line, and just the kinds of things, Dom, that you just normally don't overcome. I mean, you blow 2 scoring chances against a high-level team like Davis, that's it. You're out. And one way or another, they figured it out defensively, and they forced 5 turnovers, 5 interceptions on the day. They had a pick on every level of the defense, defensive line, linebacker, secondary, all 3 levels had at least one. And they squandered a couple of those opportunities off of short fields. And that's, if you look at the total numbers, total yardage favors Davis, but it's because USD had so many short fields, and they weren't able to capitalize on all those. But to their credit, down the stretch when they absolutely had to have them to put them away, they got them, including after Davis cut it to 28-21, they put together a 75-yard drive in 7 plays, and Travis Tice had a huge part in that. Why wouldn't he? That one really salted the game away. And then, of course, they, in fitting form, picked them off in the end zone again at the end, just for good measure. So I think the score is not necessarily indicative of entirely how well they played, but at the same time, they definitely made some mistakes and gave Davis opportunities to take that game away from them, and they just didn't let them do it.
So now the trip to Bozeman, this team is watching them up close, and that last 4 minutes, how much has that carried them? That last 4 minutes against NDSU for what they've done in the 2 games since, in your opinion?
I think they've, that belief, the confidence that probably instilled certainly helped against Tarleton.
Yeah.
I mean, they were in a hole there. They were really struggling to figure out that slow mesh RPO, and in talking to the coaching staff, they admitted that it took longer to get it figured out than they expected it to. I think that, talent versus talent, they were really confident going into that game, and I think rightfully so, but it just didn't go that way. In playoff games, Bob Nielsen said this after each of the last 2 playoff games. He said playoff games rarely go the way that you think they're going to go. I think the other Valley teams could probably attest to that too at this point. So, I do think that last 4 minutes certainly gave them something a little bit extra, that they were able to, hey, we're never out of this thing, regardless of what happens or whatever we need to overcome, whether it's points on the scoreboard or our own mistakes. So I think there's something to that they've used that a little bit here.
This game with Montana State, and they've been cruising. They haven't been tested, honestly, all season long. Outside of that opening game with New Mexico is Montana State. How big a challenge, and what are you, in your mind, them going to this environment? And I know they played in Brookings earlier this season, did USD. This is different, a different animal they're going to face on Saturday afternoon in Bozeman.
Yeah, it really is, and they understand that. In fact, I just jumped off the Zoom with with Coach Nielsen, so that was a big part of the conversation, as you can imagine. And if you saw the environment that they had last Friday night in that game against Idaho, what an atmosphere,
Yeah.
And I think if you're not excited as a football player, as a football coach, to have this opportunity at this point of the season, you're one win away from Frisco, to go there and get to play in that. I mean, that should mean something to you. And yes, that makes it that much more challenging. It's a place that USD does not have a lot of familiarity with, to be honest. I don't exactly off the top of my head know when the last time was they played out there, but every trip that I've made with them has been to Missoula.
Yeah.
They've played a lot against Montana, but not so much against Montana State. And so that part will be new, especially for this coaching staff and these guys. Monumental challenge. Malott is awesome. They run the ball incredibly well. That happens to be a strength of USD defensively. So, now they're going to face something they haven't seen, at least to that degree yet this year. But they've handled the stiffest of challenges they've had on the ground so far this year pretty well. So we'll see. But, for right now, I mean, to a degree, they're sort of playing with house money because they're in new territory. They've never been here before. They understand that they're not ready to be done. They want to win this game, obviously. In talking, Cal Davis coach Tim Plow said as much, having seen both teams. He said afterwards, and maybe he was just puffing everybody up, I don't know. He said, I think it's going to be a really good football game. And certainly I hope anybody who's a fan of FCS football should be hoping for that to be the case.
The only matchup I can find was 2008 in Bozeman. Montana State won 37-18, so it's been a little bit between the two. It has not been a long time. So for the Bison and the Jackrabbits, who are going to meet again on Saturday. It was 13-9 when they played in October. Jimmy Rogers, I believe you asked him the question in the postgame press conference, was emphatic on we're going to see these guys again, whether it's here or I'm assuming he meant in Frisco. And he was pretty outward with that, Jay, when you asked him that. And now they got it. And the Jacks are on a different level from that game in October to where they're at right now, in my mind.
Yeah, and it's really started shortly thereafter. I don't think they had quite reached this level even the next week against USD, and partly because the Coyotes are a really good football team, and that was going to be a tough game no matter what. But boy, once they turned the corner in that whole month of November, I mean, they dominated at a different level. And defensively, they've been good all year, but they've approached what they did last year, which is really saying something because we've talked about how historic that group was on that side of the ball. So. They found a different groove here down the stretch, which obviously this is the time you want to be doing that. You're right. He was very pointed in those comments post game back in October that and the players too.
Yeah.
They were confident this was going to happen again at one point or another, whether it be before Frisco or in Frisco. Here we are. And I couldn't be more excited to see round two. Looking forward to making the trip again and seeing how it goes this time.
How different is the Jacks lineup with Kirby Voorhees and Tucker Large? Large makes, and no pun intended, a huge impact on the game, but neither one of them played in the game in Fargo.
Yeah, and Voorhees, he's a supplemental piece right now, but we've seen when he's gotten his opportunities how effective he can be. Amar and Angel have just been playing so well, especially of late down the stretch. I mean, they've been running the ball really well. Spreading it around, but those two certainly are leading the way. So his impact not as much by comparison to Tucker. Tucker's been awesome. He's made plays every week that he's been out there. Jimmy has said he's the smallest guy on our defense, but he plays with the biggest chip on his shoulder, and that you see that. I mean, he wears his emotions on his sleeve, and he's an uber confident and uber talented player, and he's a big part of how that defense has reached this level, certainly against the pass.
I mentioned this on the news on Saturday. This is the one item that's missing from South Dakota State's resume. They've beat the Bison. They've beat the Bison in Fargo for the marker. They beat the Bison for the national championship. The one thing they haven't done is beat the Bison in the playoffs in Fargo. This is it. This is the one thing that's missing.
And I bet everybody in that locker room knows
that.
So, that just adds an extra element to it. I mean, talk about these two teams and how good they've been all year. It seems fitting that we get to see it again. And at the same time, sort of unfortunate that we don't get to see it in some ways, around down the road.
Yep.
But It is what it is, and I don't care what anybody says. The 4 teams that should be playing right now are playing right now, and that's good for FCS football to have all 4 of these teams. They're clearly the best 4 teams in the country, in my opinion, all year long. And 2 of them are going to play for the title, and that's awesome.
My producer Eric Bonnell, as you well know, is a Wisconsin guy, much like yourself. So I'm contractually obligated to ask you either about the Packers or the Bucks. So you want to take either one?
Hey, Packers, let's go. That's freshest in my mind.
The white jerseys, you all right with that from last night? Are you a fan of those?
I don't hate them.
Yeah.
I get what people are saying. I wish they'd add a little bit more into the helmet just to make it pop a little bit more. But I kind of like the all white, to be honest. So yeah, some people really hate them though.
Green Bay is just sitting there, 10 wins. You talk about the Missouri Valley. NFC North has just been murderer's row this year.
Yeah, and you remember, for all those years, it was just a joke.
Yes.
It was the Packers and it was everybody else. And so it's been fun to see how good these teams all really are. And then the Bears. Goodness. The Vikings still have a chance at the outside chance at the 1 seed. The Lions have been the best team in the NFC all year. The Packers are just sitting there and, 10 wins, as you said, and a very favorable schedule down these last couple of weeks. And that NFC playoff is gonna be interesting.
I know I got to let you go here, but the latest net rankings are out. The Bison are in the top 100. They're up there with USD, SDSU, and St. Thomas. As we look forward to Summit League hoops starting here in just a couple weeks, it looks top heavy. Is that accurate from what you've seen so far in the Summit League on the men's side?
So far, I think Kansas City is going to work its way back into that mix. Jamar Brown's been out. I think he's back now, and they've won a couple of games. And they were really struggling there, trying to get Division I wins at the beginning of the season. I do think all those teams you mentioned, though, are legitimately solid teams, all of them. And what appeared to be a pretty wide open Summit League race coming into the year, I still think is maybe not as many teams involved as we might have guessed back in October, but I think it's going to be 4 or 5 deep, and I think that 3 days in Sioux Falls is going to be fun, just like it always is.
Always is. Great to see you, bud. Safe travels. I'll see you on Saturday. Okay.
Sounds great, Dom. Thanks for having me.
Jay Elsen joins us here on this Monday from Midcoast Sports. Of course, he calls South Dakota State and South Dakota football. We appreciate his time. We'll take our final break. We come back. We'll wrap things up. We'll give you a closer look. Vikings, Bears. Preview that. Look at that NFC standings before we say goodbye. Hot Mike wraps right after this.